Hey there everybody, Joe here. Thanks for watching my video. I thought I would take a little bit of time out and paint a landscape for myself here. I've been seeing a lot of pretty colors around here since it's fall and we've got all the red and yellow leaves. And so I was imagining something dramatic with a cliff and a tree. I did a pencil sketch beforehand, and that's the way I do all of my painting projects now. Whether it's for a client or for myself, I will always render it first with pencil or something else, maybe on the computer if I feel like doing it in color, or maybe just a small and simple painting. But the point is, you can see me doing the pencil drawing here in this video. I have the opportunity to see my idea in its raw state, whatever I can just sketch out really quickly and then develop it on a small scale, because even though I'm able to just go straight to the canvas with my idea and adjust as I go, that will take me a lot more time when I reach the point where I realize that my raw idea wasn't quite as good as what I can develop that idea into by seeing it first and then thinking, well, how could it be better? So I think it's smart to give yourself the opportunity to adjust your idea on a small scale before you move to a larger one that's not quite as easy to adjust. So I'm going to start painting now, and I'm not going to use that drawing. I'm not going to look at it because I still want to work from my imagination. It's just that drawing is a great tool for developing that picture in my memory, so that I have something that I'm more confident about as I'm painting now. I've already gone through some hypothetical situations, some ideas, different ideas, and worked it out with pencil. And now I'm ready to take what I've got in my mind to the canvas. But I gotta be careful, if I get into a copying project, man, I can be there for a long time. So I just don't have it in me to copy something loosely. It's like a real hang-up with me. If I'm going from a picture, I have to go exactly from a picture. Man, I don't know why I'm like that, but I am. All right, so I'm going to start with this painting and do some clips right here. Before I start putting paint on the canvas, I'll show you the paints that I'm using real quick. I like to use wall paint, and so that is acrylic water-based paint, and I find it to be every bit as good in quality as paint that's in tubes, but more durable. I think that you can scrub this paint and not worry about it coming off of anything. It really has good adhesion, and I think it will last for a very long time. Right here, you can see my phthalo blue. Right here, you can go into a paint store. All of these, I just ask for the pigment all by itself. I just look at their pigment and say, hey, can I have that pigment in a deep satin base? So phthalo blue in a deep satin base. This would be like a burnt umber. That's what this brown is. Magenta, the common word used to describe that pomegranate, real vivid, deep red violet color. Then a bright yellow, phthalo green, and that's my bright red right there. And this company in particular, Sherwin-Williams, has a paint base that has a brighter pigment to it than the red pigments. I don't think it's by a whole lot, but I like to use it, so that's the one that I'm using. This is Sherwin-Williams Duration. That's the brand right here, in case you want to know. I don't think it's the only brand to use, or it's something that's available here that I think works really well. I like it. And then I just got a bright white and black. I always like to use black and white in my paintings, and I've got my violet here. And the violet and the brown are from a different company that's here in Flagstaff. This is a PPG paint. This one, let's see what this one is. You can see that I'm not loyal to one particular brand. I just like to get the more expensive usually, so that it has a harder, more heavy bodied finish. I just trust the durability of it better. And So I was going to say this white is high reflective white. If you do have a Sherwin-Williams by you and you want to use the same things, they're high reflective white. So all of my colors, except for the black and the white and the red, those are tints that come right off of the shelf. They just come that color. But these they tint behind the counter at the paint store, and all of them are just that one pigment in a deep satin base. Now you can also go to muraljoe.com/FAQ to see a quick write-up that I did about the kind of paints that I like to use. And I wrote a little bit on there about clear coating as well. Sometimes it's a extra layer of protection on your picture, or just a nice finish to clear coat it. So if you want more info on the paint, you can look there, and you can also download my free video getting started with materials and paints that I made for the sake of painting an interior mural, in which case I would use the same paints. I'm by trade a mural painter, if you're not accustomed to watching my videos, if you don't already know that. And so I started with big paintings, big murals, and then wanted to experiment with doing canvases. And now I really love doing all of those things: oil, water-based. So the first thing I'm going to do here is grab my big brush. So I'm going to call this my big brush. It's actually a small brush compared to what I'm used to doing big walls, but a 1-inch Purdy, just an ordinary contracting brush for painting trim in your house. You know, you're painting door jambs. I really like the way these perform with the water-based paint, so I just use them with the smaller paintings. But when I get to the details, I'll use a very similar brush, but kind of the small version. This is just a cheap one. You can get more expensive ones that'll last longer. This is Taklon. That's the kind of bristle. It's a synthetic kind of plasticky material bristle. What's good about it is that it comes to a chisel-like point. When you get it wet and you're using it, you can get a real skinny line if you go this way, because it has that blade-like tip, and then you can get big shapes if you paint this way. I like to use those because of the many different strokes I can get with them. So I'm seeing a big cliff here, just like in my drawing. I want to put a big rock. I want a dramatic picture with light just coming through and striking. I tried to get that feel with the pencil. You know, doing a rendering with pencil is also, I think, really good for helping me to understand ahead of time where my darkest and lightest areas are. Because you have to be mindful of the gray scale while you're working with pencil, because it's all you've got. You don't have color to you know, give the feel of light and shadow coming from different things. I'm kind of imagining a cliff with a lot of, I always liked the way it looked. Here in the Southwest, I'm in Arizona, we have a lot of rocks that you know, they have corners. They have a lot of corners, like they're broken off, and the cleavage lines where they're broken just come off like glass, and it leaves sharp edges. And I like the dramatic look of that. I'm sure that that's in a lot of other places in the world as well, but this is what I'm used to looking at. And so I'm just going to use this brown. This is just that burnt umber is what I think is closest to. I actually don't know what it is, because I just looked at the brown and said, can I have that one in a deep base, please? Now the people at the paint store, they'll always say, well, what are you going to use it for? Which is annoying to me, you know, but they're trying to do quality control. They don't want returns on things that can't be resold, I guess. So everywhere I put this, I'm gonna make this my shadow. And so the way it goes with light and shadow in an outdoor scene is that typically the sky has some amount of blue in it, and that's putting blue light on everything. And the result of blue light mixing with any other colored light is something more violet. And so more violet than the blue that it's coming from. So these shadows I want to be more violet than the direct light coming from a full spectrum white sun. I don't know, maybe it's an orange sun. Maybe I want the sun, I guess I have a sun low in the sky, so I'll make it more of an orange light. But the same is true, you know, that's really, really opposite to the blue-violet color. So here I'll use yellow in my brown to get a real orangey gold color for the bright light. And I'll just leave the brown by itself because it's already a little bit of a purplish brown to me. But the point is that the comparison looks like the difference between them. The brown looks more violet in this. Let me put this yellow on so you can see what I'm talking about. I never like to say use this exact color. That's why I just show you the primaries that I like to work from. Because it's the relationship between the colors that makes all of the difference. And all the difference in causing the look of light and shadow. You know, to communicate what's happening in the picture. There's a lot of artistry behind exactly which balance is going to be the most pleasing. But I'm just talking about communicating what's happening in the picture. Getting the light and the shadow to create the image, the 3D scene that you're imagining. You just want the difference between the colors, because you can take a photograph, as we all know, and you can alter the hue. You can shift it to, you know, a little bit more bluish, or as many people might say, you could make it cool or warm. You know, the temperature, the color temperature moves toward the blue or toward the orange colors. And my point is that you do that and you still have the picture. It just looks like it has an overall different color scheme, but you still have the picture because the relationships between the colors are preserved. So I would be misleading you if I said to get the look of sunlight striking a rock face, you need to use burnt umber and yellow. That wouldn't be a proper set of instructions in my mind, because the same thing could be done with red and purple. You know, just as long as I have that shadow looking more violet, more gray, blue, violet than the sunlit areas. So here I'm thinking this is further away, so I want to see a lot of it in my white. This is something that happens with cans of paint, is they separate a little bit. And if I'm working on a big picture, I'll just leave it separated because it keeps the top from drying out. But down here in this cold basement where I'm working, I'm not worried about this paint drying. I just had to shake it up a little bit because I was getting some of the clear paint base right here. Now I want little shapes where it's further away. That was the point that I was getting to, is back here I want to see a lot more of the small shapes, and then I want to see bigger shapes as it moves over here to where I want it to look closer. So I better see what I can do about making that difference. Here I'm just gonna put a whole bunch of that yellow and brown mix, get just a real big area of the sunlit color. I'm gonna pull out the little brush after I get this in place, after I get a few shapes that I like on here. And I probably don't want to go too bright, you know, well, I don't know, we'll see. I'm actually not sure about that. So what would be cool here? I really like the way it looks, having these big edges, just boom, right there. Just a big triangle, kind of an edge bending away from the light. So I'm imagining this facing toward me, and then the light, more yellowish brown, facing a little more to the left, and the sun coming this way. Then I'm going to put another edge right here next to it, just kind of opposite. Right there. Yeah, I like that. I like the way that looks. I want I want the rock to have a real big area here in the front, but not too much that it overlaps where I want to have mountains up in here. So I think I went too high right there. So this will be kind of fun, having a big rock face right in here. I feel like at the moment I'm just thinking a little bit too hard, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker so that I don't have time to think. That's a trick I use from time to time. I want this to be have the look of bending toward me like this. So, you know, whenever I want that effect of something coming more parallel, an edge, a surface parallel to my line of vision, I just think of it being more reflective, just like water's more reflective when it tilts this way. I'm looking across the surface, I see lots of reflection, but when I look straight in, I see hardly any. Any other surface behaves the same way, so I can use that trick and make this a little bit grayer color. So what I'll do is grab a little bit of my violet there, and I'll put it over in this, and we'll just see if that tiny bit of violet helps with the feel of this being a little more parallel with my vision. So we're looking kind of along the surface right there, and it can still be nice and light, you know, because it's facing toward the sun. Now I'm going to use that brown. So that more violet color would be because of the background colors that I intend to make something, you know, a sky, some shade of blue, and forest with shadows. And so you just have a kind of a neutral grayish, bluish, violet color. Anything close to that I think does the trick with this. So I just know that if I had a gray, blue, violet, it's something that we're all used to seeing on edges that tilt parallel to vision. So now I'm going to start making these edges, maybe building these shapes out a little bit, and maybe like a few edges facing downward as well. That might be cool. And if this is above eye level, then I can use that. I can use that to make the perspective look better too. So, you know, anything that's tilting, if I've got a line, you know, if we've got a vanishing point, then anything above eye level is going to go up to the edge of the canvas. So if I do that with most of these lines on this rock, that'll give me a perspective on my rock that looks like I'm looking more upward at this. And I think that'll be a good feel for this picture. Let me do this bright color here again. A little bit of yellow on this one. This is facing toward the sunlight. Put another layer behind this rock too. So back there, you know, adding atmosphere. As a general rule, when you're adding atmosphere, I intend on having some kind of a blue sky up there. So I'm going to put blue. But anytime you mix blue with anything, it turns greener than what natural light would do. So if you add violet, it adds the red color that's lost. That's why it turns greener, because red light is lost when you mix blue with something. So to make a long story short, you add violet so that it looks like natural light mixing instead of like that green effect that happens when paint mixes. So for starters, I'll just put this color in here and I'll let it mix with the brown that's already in my brush. I'll put some more brown in it, and that'll be like a background cliff of the same color. Let's put that up in here, go this way. I want to bend that down a little bit more. I'm going to bring the top of this rock down so that I have room to put some trees and mountains. Yeah, that's cool. So that's a grayer, more blue-violet color. It's further away, and then I'll put some white on it with a little bit of yellow, just like I did on this one, to make the more sunlit portions of it. And that's kind of gray, you know, I would like to see it be a little more colorful, so I'm going to add brown and yellow, just like I did on here. There's my brown and yellow. Now it just needs the white. Now hopefully this will be my, I need to make smaller shapes, so this is going to be my more distant rock. That's further away and up higher. You know, I don't want to be too picky in the beginning of the picture because I just got to get a feel for where everything's going to be. That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, I like to look at that. It's cool. Get lots of white in there. You know, I use a lot of white. Feels like I'm just loading it on there. But I know that once I clean the brush out and do an actual pure white on here, then that'll really be a nice highlight, because this is still mixing a lot with my other colors that are on here. So this white is definitely not a pure white, as I just keep loading it on. When I apply paint, I put it on an area, and then you can see that I keep brushing over that same area. I don't go too quickly to spreading it out. I keep it in one area until it mixes to a color that I like, and then I decide where I want to spread it to. I almost slipped off my stool just now. I'm like sitting over on the edge of it trying to get to this picture. All right. Yeah, I'm liking the way that looks. And so we'll just let that be for a little bit. And down here, I want to work on this rock just a little bit more. I am starting to see that look of it kind of bending this way. I think that if this was a little bit lighter, it might have that effect even more. Let's do like a bright whitish kind of a reflection color. Let's add another edge right there. See, I just start, you know, at that moment that I start feeling creative, then that's when I know I'm starting to make progress, you know, because I'm seeing shapes happen. I just put the colors on there, and it's letting the color make the shapes rather than trying to see the shapes and put the color on them. I just have the color dialed in so that I know wherever I put this, it makes the face of a rock facing in this particular direction. And that helps me, because then, you know, wherever I put the brush down, it just makes a shape. And then I can use that as a strategy to just randomly put the colors wherever they land until something that looks like something happens. Let's put this brown on here again. I think I'm going to do just a little bit of violet in there. Make this look like a little more of a shadow. Ooh, that's a nice dark shadow. That's what I want, dramatic. And that one's close, you know, I want it to be. I want it to be real dark where it's up close. You can see that I kind of made these stair steps where I had it going out. Suddenly I made another bar going there so that the two edges kind of line up that way. I don't really have any edges kind of going upward. I wonder what it would look like if I kind of did this. I got to keep this one light because it's facing upward a little bit. I don't know what I'm doing. Just having some fun trying to experiment with some shapes here. It's fun to do these skinny lines too, you know, you always get these cool lines where the rock is fractured and leaves those shadows. All right, what else can we do here? Let me kind of blend some of this with water. A lot of the time I will reach something that looks good, but I just think, but it's just not, I'm just not hitting that rhythm of creativity where it's like it looks good enough to inspire me to build onto the shape, so I just redo it. There's a lot of redos in my work, but I don't know, I have fun doing it. I'm going to put an edge facing downward right here, so I go to this corner, see if I follow the corners that are already there, it'll definitely keep things looking better, more realistic. So I'll make a shadow coming down under this. So where it's facing down, it's not really facing toward the blue sky, so I won't do the blue-violet color on that downward facing shadow, at least not nearly as much. You know, there might be bluish colored light bouncing all over the place, but anything facing out or up would have more. So I'm going to put this edge in here, use some horizontal brush strokes to get some little details in there. And that looks kind of cool. Hold on. And then when it goes down onto the face, that's where I'm going to have it be a little more of the blue-violet color, so that it looks like it's catching light from the sky. That's how you can do a lot of complex light and shadow on rocks, is by putting color in the shadows according to what the color of the things that the shadows are facing are. You know, this is facing the sky, so I'm going to put more, I'm deciding that it's facing the sky. So I put that more violet color, and see, that makes a surface that's going out this way, while this one makes a surface that's facing down. Here I'll put this brown again. My paint's starting to get real tacky. Sometimes you gotta pull off of an area, the paint gets piled up, especially when you're working real fast with the big brush. The paint can get piled up on there, and it causes the other paint to dry real fast. So I might need to just move to a different part of the picture in order to not get it makes these unattractive pull marks if I try to paint too much on a half dry area. Alright, I've got an area coming back down into the light right here. We'll use the yellow, brown, and mostly white mix. So I don't want a real long shadow here, because I want the light to really be going very directly toward this. It's fun to flip-flop between the positive and negative space, or in more simple terms, the light and the shadow areas on this, because you get different shapes. You know, whether you're painting the shapes in between the others or painting the others in between the shapes. You know, flip-flopping the part that you're painting and the part that you're not painting. I do that when I paint trees too. I'll paint the space in between the trees, then I'll paint the trees. And by going back and forth, I feel like I get a more interesting looking mix of shapes. And then you just, you know, once you start to see things you like, that's when it's time to pull out the smaller brush and manually adjust things to where you really like them. Yeah, see, I'm starting to feel like this is looking like something now. I like the way that edge looks. I like the way this edge looks. And I think I want to, what do I want to see? I want to see this one kind of go up a little bit like that. I want to just take this up and go a little bit more this way. Not because of any special reason other than it just looked like it might look cool. That's it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to need a little bit more separation between my background and my foreground here too. See, now here I can start doing variations. Now that I have shapes in place that I think are looking good, I can start adding a brighter white here to make an edge facing maybe more directly toward the sunlight. Here I left the slightly darker color to be maybe an edge facing, still facing the light, but facing toward it. So I'm doing light and shadow within the light area of the rock, because that's how nature is. It's not just an either or. It's how much light and how much shadow, rather than something being just one of two colors. There's all of these intermediate colors, but I don't want to do those before I have something to work with. All right, I think it's time to pull out my smaller brush, because there's some details in here that I feel like I can have some fun working with. So here I'll do the same colors, my yellow and brown. I think this will be fun too. When I get down to the last details, I'll pull out my tubes of acrylic paint so that I can get a little bit brighter tones. And I always just really enjoy that final step. You know, it's like putting a bow on your work when you get to those details. But I'd be wasting my energy if I tried to skip to that step here. I'm still in the building process. See, this little brush, you get all kinds of little shapes you don't get with the big one, where it leaves a little more white, a little less white, and it makes edges without me consciously trying to make them, you know. I'll grab a little more of that yellow, kind of enhance that sunlit feel of it. I am trying to lay down the texture of my brush strokes too. I've practiced this quite a bit to try to have a technique that leaves the paint as flat as possible so that I have room to keep building onto it, because I like to keep adjusting and adjusting, and the paint does start to build up real heavy. So I'll try to keep it as flat as possible, as long as possible. Inevitably it builds up, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, a lot of people do that on purpose for the look of the texture, which can be really cool. I just don't want it to happen before I'm ready. One thing I can do, since I know that I'm going to come back and paint all kinds of stuff over this, I wouldn't do this if I was on some finer details, but I can just take a big brush to knock down the built up areas. Like I said, I'm not against the texture. I mean, awesome paintings are done with heavy texture, but I'm just not ready for these to be the places where the heavy texture is. So if I just do this lightly over the picture, it just takes down all of the heavy edges and gives me room to build more layers of paint without that happening. And it does this, you know, cool blending a lot of the time too. You'll get some blending by hitting the paint when it's not quite all the way dry. Some areas will blend if you use a big brush and just lightly and quickly go over the top. But if I keep doing it too much, I'm going to get some real ugly pole marks where it's actually starting to kind of like the paint's starting to dry and goober up. I don't want that. I just want to get the heavy spots on. I'm going to let that dry for a minute so that I can put more paint over it now without getting some real unwanted texture. And it doesn't take long. This is the nice thing about the water-based paint, is that it's minutes before it's ready to go over it with another layer. However, if you want to have your longest dry time, you know, if you want it to dry as slowly as possible, then when it comes to layering, you know, give yourself like 8 hours a day for it to fully cure, and then it won't dry the paint that you put on top of it as quickly. But since I know I can work fast enough to beat the dry time, I'm just going to let it dry to the touch and then come back in a couple minutes. You know, it always helps to take breaks. Rest, I think, is a very important element of creativity. Looking at a picture with a fresh perspective where I always feel like my mind gets numb to what I'm looking at. You know, I see my brush strokes. After a while, all I see is my brush strokes, and they always look wrong. So when I come back with a fresh look, you know, it's that initial first impression again. It just seems like it's refreshed. That's when I always see the errors in my work, as well as the things that are good about it. I have a clear look at what I need to do to make it better. It's just that my vision seems clearer. That was a long way of saying that, but I'm experiencing that right now. I'm thinking, wow, this would look cool to round this area into, just like in my drawing, make kind of a recessed area. And then here I'm actually seeing an arch. These curved lines make me think of an arch, so I'm gonna put those couple of things in there. Up here I'm seeing that this shadow would look better if the darkness was flip-flopped. This one darker, this one lighter, I think will help to bend this whole shape. Like I want it to be like a horseshoe, kind of a cove in this cliff. So I want to work on those things. Up here, this was my brown. I'm gonna get a little bit closer to my work here. I use my brown and white for the shadows that were facing more directly toward me. And since I've got my smaller brush now, I'm going to see if I can vary the darkness, lightness a little bit, make darker areas, lighter areas, just so that it doesn't look like such an overly perfect surface there, you know, like maybe some of it's facing more upward, outward, whatever. Let's just see what the colors do if I make them not all the same. I do kind of have a, let's see, I have like an edge on that face, but I think it won't matter if it doesn't wrap around. Go on both edges of that rock. I like to take, whenever I have, you know, the shadows of an edge facing down or something, I always feel like it makes the picture look more three-dimensional and believable if I wrap it around to another. You know, if I make them line up. So for instance, I take this shadow and make it line up with the shadow on the face there, so it looks like it wraps around. But at the same time, I'm feeling like, it's being too careful at this point in the project. Okay, then here, this one I think could go lighter, so that perhaps as it's bending this way, this edge is facing a little bit more toward the light. I'm just using brown and white. That's all I'm using right now. Put some white in there for some shadows facing up toward the sky. White removes color just like black does. So whenever I want a more colorless, reflective color, just adding white to a color can work real good for just making it look like it's facing a little bit more up toward the sky. I don't always have to add that blue-violet in there if I'm just doing real subtle. In fact, I can, you know, that's an option, but sometimes just white is enough. Looking at that, thinking, man, it would be cool to break this edge up a little bit. I'm going to put the yellow in here where I've got my bright color, and a little bit of brown again. And then in here I'm going to make a You know, I start with big shapes and then I try to make shapes within shapes. So if I make some small shapes that are making this larger triangle, and all I do is just break it apart into smaller pieces a little bit so that it's not just one single big shape, you know. And I can do that by taking some of the light and putting it in the dark, and some of the dark and putting it in the light, so that it's not just one line that divides the dark and light anymore. Try to even those out a little bit, the darkness of them. There, see, I've got the same larger shape, but I've broken it up into some smaller shapes as well, so that it creates some, hopefully some more interest in my picture. I think I want this shadow here to not be so big, so I'm going to thin this one out right here. Put some white down here. Borrow some of that color. I always like to have, you know, a consistent color. So a lot of the time you'll see me borrow color from where I've got excess and put it down in another spot. If nothing else, just because I want to get that big blob of paint off. And maybe if I just take it and put it somewhere else, something cool might happen. I might get lucky. A lot of the time I just end up painting over it, but I'm in the habit of quickly grabbing areas of excessive paint and just borrowing that color and putting it somewhere else when I need it. Seems to work in harmony with the fast painting technique. You know, it keeps me moving, which keeps some unexpected things happening. I wasn't planning on that, but I kind of like that swoop in there. What if we did a couple more? I'm going to do more of those swoopy shapes up here. Make the edge of that rock disappear behind this one. I kind of like that too, just having them run together here. Let's see how that goes. What if we just... It's a fun shape though. It's just, you know, I love the unexpected, so whenever I do something that... I try to be responsive to the things that happen unexpectedly so that I can have that feel of the unexpected in my picture. Okay, so down here I'm thinking I'm going to leave that alone for a while because my imagination power is getting weak in that one. Every time I say I'm going to do something, I always get a last minute urge to keep going. I'm just going to go like this. For some reason I just feel like it might be cool to extend this out a little further. I just like the way that kind of comes out and has that overhang feel, like it's extending outward. I love that feeling when you go and you look at large rock faces. The feeling of being small. It's an important feeling to have once in a while. It's a good reminder that you know, all of your problems in life, they're finite, they're limited, they can only go on for so long, you know. Just, it's nice to have a, I don't know, there's just something about big things. Going to the ocean, looking at a big rock face, I'm small. That's a good feeling to me. All right, so what if I just took this and curved it in? I want this to be kind of a curved area, just like in my pencil drawing. And I want to make these, gradients that have kind of a hard edge at the start, so that it looks like a bunch of broken off areas. So when I'm talking about gradients, I do this a lot, you know, just like I did under here. But the effect is that I have a sharp edge of this brown right here, and then it fades to a lighter color as I move this way, and that creates a concave shape, assuming that the light is moving this way. It creates a shape that responds to that direction of light. So here I'll put the white on the opposite side and then blend that toward the brown, if I want to maintain that specific look of those sharp edges that kind of have that concaved curve to them. that. Then I'll grab some of that lighter color and put it in here. I keep unpainting what I paint. Put some dark shadow in there so that it looks like it's kind of bending around. I'll dip my brush in a little bit of water here since this is drying pretty quick. Just like I said, you know, even though this paint is dry, the paint that I put on top of it, since it's only been minutes, it's still going to dry fast when I put paint on top of that. Just messing with shapes here, trying to see what I like the look of the most. Let's grab some yellow. Most of this picture so far, this whole rock is just yellow, brown, and white. But I did put some of that purple in there. That's kind of a fun shape right there. I like that. This big thing here, I'll leave that one. I think I'll leave it. I say I'm going to do stuff, but then something else happens. There it goes. No, I want to keep it. I liked that shape. I want to go with it. Put that right in there. I'm going to just see what happens if I just put a slice right through there. This is how you do cracks and rocks. I'll show you. I start, this is how I do cracks and rocks. I start with the darkest area and then blend the lighter colors to that so that I have a real skinny line left behind. So getting that sharp line that's that crevice in the rock, I accomplish by painting up to that area. So I put this dark line in here, and so this is a nice place to do maybe a long crack in the rock. So I'll get a nice dark color. A lot of the time I'll use black if I want it to be real close and three-dimensional. This is more distant, so we'll see. I'll just start with the brown and enhance it with black if it feels like it needs it. And then I'll take my bright color, yellow, white, brown, same color that I've been using, and I'll blend it up to that, just grabbing a little bit so that it gradually pulls the colors together so that it's not just a sharp line, but I have all of these gradually darker colors moving toward that line, so it makes it look like the rock bends into that shadow. It's a lot easier to paint both sides of a line when you're trying to get a real sharp, skinny line. A lot easier to bring the edges to it rather than trying to paint that sharp edge from the beginning. So here I can start pulling my lighter color into that. I've got a pretty good gradient now where it's gradually getting lighter as it moves out. So now if I put some sharp edges on there to mix it up, it might start to look like more broken rock shapes. Painting rocks is fun, you know. I always find it therapeutic. Just seeing what happens. Trying to respond to whatever lucky things happen when I do random strokes with my brush. I guess it's inaccurate to say random strokes with the brush, but you know, because there is definitely a method to it. But I purposely move at a speed that doesn't allow me to overthink it. You know, with techniques that I have known to produce looks, I'm definitely using a technique with my brush to get those edges that I have known to cause the look of rock. But then I move quick enough that I'm going to see some things I don't like, some things I do like, and then it'll give me the opportunity to choose what I want to keep. Get a little more of that yellow. It's drying pretty quick. Now I'm going a little bit darker up in here because that's facing down instead of just sideways. So I want this to be darker so that it looks like my arch shape is now facing downward right there. I think I definitely get the most natural looking results by not trying to control everything, learning how to produce natural looking shapes, learning what techniques will produce natural looking shapes, but then always understanding that I need to try to look for the best things that happen and then quickly react and turn it into something, you know, take advantage of what happens. Real-time creativity. Maybe that's what I should call it. So I like this kind of thing here where you can just have different variations of bending away from the light. So here it's not such a dark shadow, just dark enough to look like it's kind of bending away from the light. But then right next to it is a darker one. But I start by seeing a greater, larger structure and then adding those details into it. All right, then back in here I'm thinking it would be cool to see an arch, like I was talking about. Just make this face coming down this way, a white. I wasn't going to do this originally, but it's just looking so much like it now at this point. I just think it'll be a really cool element in the picture. So I'm going to add a lot of yellow to that. I want a new word I learned just in the last couple of years. Someone commented, instead of painting with ethereal, I want a real ethereal look on this. Like there's light that's gonna come in here and it's lighting up the shadowed areas, indirect light bouncing off of things, so I have all this color. So I'm gonna add a lot of yellow to this dark area that's gonna be the inside of this arch. So for now I'm not gonna overthink the shapes. I'm just gonna try to get the colors in place for the larger shape that I'm imagining. Then I want this to kind of arch up this way and then go down again. This will be the darker inside of it here. I'm going to make some curved lines now, just trying to visualize that arch, how it might naturally connect with this big rock. I think I need a little bit more transition. I'm gonna add a little yellow, try to get a little bit more intermediate color here. You always want color in the transitions, you know, where light meets shadow. Here, since I'm using a very colored shadow, I don't have as much risk of my transition area turning gray, but that yellow, see that yellow looks good in there, in that transition area. To look like, more like light and less like paint. So, let's see. I think one thing that might look cool is to, this same big crack in the rock, I'm going to put it right here. Since this part of the arch is further away, I'm going to drop it down. Put some perspective in there. Now I'm seeing definitely a lot more of those kind of cracks looking good in this picture, so I'll do that more, but right now I'm just going to worry about getting the overall shape in place. This one no longer fits for me. When I did this, that kind of changed this feel, so this here, you know, I'll keep some of it, but I'm going to replace some of this rock now. Put a little bit of brown and yellow in there. And might also help this look further away if I just really make these shapes smaller. You know, anything can happen. Maybe it's, I don't need to make every single shape smaller because maybe there's something giant back there. But when, you know, I think that people are especially sensitive to overall patterns in things. And so if I have the presence of smaller shapes, just make sure they're included. Not everything has to be a tiny shape. But as long as I have small shapes included, then this further rock will look a lot more far away. Yeah, see those small brush strokes, those are doing it for me. I really like the look of that. Kind of a fun rock structure. I like that. Okay, but to really make that look like an arch, you know, really pull that together. The top would be the darkest, and it's kind of missing that aspect at the moment. So I'm going to put that in there. It needs to be darkest right up in here. And we'll just pull these lines straight out from inside of that little cave-like area. And then I'm going to bring this same brown color in a little bit more. You know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to make a glow from the other side. I think that'll be cool. Let's put yellow in here so it doesn't look like a cave. I'm going to put light. You know, it's the colors that make it light or shadow, not where you put it that makes it light or shadow. It's the colors. So by putting the yellow in there, I can put light on the inside, opposite side of this rock. Oh, I'm liking the look of that a lot better. That's cool. I don't have any shame in looking at my own work and saying that's cool. You know, because I feel like it's more of a discovery than a creation of mine. I feel like I've researched in order to see what happens when you do A, B, and C. And so it doesn't feel like bragging when I look at my work and I say, oh yeah, that's cool, that looks good, you know, but I think it must sound like that. So I apologize if it does sound like that. I just have excitement about what I'm doing, like seeing the research that I've done working and thinking, oh yeah, I thought that was going to look good, and it does look good because it makes me happy, you know. All right, I'll leave that alone for now. I don't want to get too obsessed with little details right now. I am at this exact moment getting a little bit overly obsessed with that detail. But since I started, I'm just going to go ahead and follow through and do that. I'm going to pull these dark colors down into that white, go up to the top of it, do the same thing. Trying to do the same kind of look as here, but just smaller so that it looks further away. There we go. Now if I really want to make this wrap around, here's a trick to making it just like here where I made the grayer colors at the beginning to make it look like it's coming more this way. I can do the same thing on this edge if I want to make it bend away from my eyes a little bit. So this is that purple. Just put a tiny bit right here, wherever I want the edge of this rock to go away a little bit, you know, bend around. It adds a very important element of wonder to a picture to make edges that are bending around a corner, going somewhere. So it's a valuable trick to be able to make edges look like they're bending away from you at some point. All right, now how about a background color? This is a little bit weird having this 1-2 twin shapes right there. I'm not sure if I'm going to want to keep that. I'll step back and look at it, but I'll leave it alone for the moment. I am thinking I want to see more light in here. Let's do that. Let's put more brown and yellow. Lots of yellow. I like the light. Lots of color, but maybe not quite as much white, because I still want that to look like a shadowed arch that's catching some indirect light. Yeah, there we go. I don't know what I'm going to put there. No, I'm going to put a tree here, just like in the drawing. I'm remembering I had a tree, and I liked that with the shadow on the rock. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to end up redoing the background once I have some context to look at. So for now, I'm just going to take black and white, make a gray. I'm going to go real light on the background. I don't want it to look too dark. But this gives me an opportunity to, you know, better visualize my rock shapes here and start adjusting. You know, I feel like, well, I want more room for some mountains back here. And so I'm gonna cut off some of the top of this. You know, I like that shape, it's cool and everything, but I have other things that I want to put in there. Can't do everything in a picture, so you always have to make a decision about what's good enough to keep its spot. This is all just going to be misty background, some trees, mountains, a big tree growing up here. Kicking my painting around. Yeah, I like that with that top of that cut off a little bit. I like that better. And so, all right, I've got black and white. Look, see the shadows I did? Remember how I did that with brown? And then I added the blue and the violet. But look what happens here with this. I could just add violet to that color and get the same result, I bet. Maybe. I don't even need the blue to do that. This color right here is just like that color. And so just adding a tiny bit of violet to this is a real good background shadow color. There's always more than one way to get to a color. One way to mix it. More than one way to mix it. All right, so this is a good time to rework these right here. So I'm going to take my bright rock color. This is just some paint that's drying fast, and I don't want to have big build-up spots on my painting there. So yellow and brown and white for the areas that are facing the sun. There we go. I'm going to make some big rock faces way up high here. Just pinnacles that are shooting up in the distance. But it's those gray shadows that'll really help that to look distant instead of close up. And then I don't know, maybe less yellow on the highlight. I'll try it. I don't know. I might like yellow on the highlights on these distant rocks. I'll just have to try it both ways. I'm not sure which one will look best. I do like that. That has a nice distant feel. That has less yellow in it, I think. Let's just try some. Let's try some yellow highlight in there. Let's mix a color right in here. Yellow and brown. I'll get a bunch of white. So this one just has a higher percentage of yellow, and we'll see if that looks good up in here. I would say yes. Maybe just at the tips. Just the tops of those rocks. Yeah, I like that effect. That's cool. Let's see, what else can I do here? I think with the sun going so sideways, it'll look good to have a little bit more shadow up there. Let's grab some of this color and put that right here. Then I can kind of chop off the top of this. And I can define the close rocks. I'm actually putting a shadow on the top of this, assuming that the sun is shining from the side instead of the top, so that it really creates that evening feel. And so since that's an upward facing edge, then I'm going to use purple to get the color of the sky, because the blue mixed with the brown would make something a lot more violet than what blue paint and brown paint will produce. If I do blue and brown paint, I'm going to get a greenish color. I don't want that. So I'll just use purple. Let's get a little more of that. I like that effect. Really helps separate that foreground and background. I like that. Same thing here, top of the arch. Let's grab some of this and put a little bit of darker reflected light on the top of that. I'm going to try to make it a little more subtle. Not quite as much of a violet. You're turning violet, Violet. It's a funny old movie scene. Okay. Stepping back, I'm looking at it. And definitely liking the progress here. Just deciding what else I might be able to add in there. Thinking if I want to build onto that arch anymore. Maybe I want to do something more with that. See what happens if I take that gray down into the middle of this arch right here. Put background in there. This black and white mix is an unrelated color here, so it'll immediately look like it's happening on a different layer. If a color is unrelated enough, and if you cut an edge, you know, then it'll look like it's not part of the object, but it's another layer. And gray, for whatever reason, gray does naturally seem to go backward instead of forward. Maybe that's, I can only theorize because honestly I don't know why gray goes backward instead of forward, but I can theorize that we're just so accustomed to seeing grays in the background because gray is the mix of all colors, and in backgrounds you see things all mixed together. It's a theory. I wouldn't want to jump to conclusions, say that is why gray goes back in a picture. Seems like it could be. There, now I've got my arch cut out. I like the way that looks. All right, before I go too far, doing more details on this rock, I gotta start thinking about what I'm gonna put in front of it. I don't want to paint a bunch of details just to paint over them later. And I want to put some mountains up in here too. I'm deciding which one I want to do first. Let's just do some simple mountains just to get a visual of what's happening here. Let's see. I know that I want to make snow-covered mountains, and so I'm going to do a bright side and a dark side. I'm going to do just like these rocks mountains that have these colors in them. A violet side away from the light, a bright light brown side facing toward the light, and so I'm going to need to put a sky up there behind it in order to make that stand out. Why don't I just do that now? This is looking upward enough. I could put a real turquoise spot of sky in the fall, at least around here. The air gets real dry and clear, and it leaves the bluest skies ever. The bluest skies that we see, I think, happen in October. So I'm just going to put this phthalo blue and white. Makes the best turquoise. I like that. Maybe there's some pre-mixed colors that are also very good turquoise. However you get to it, you know. This is it for me, just that. Now when you have good perspective in a painting, you can use the tiniest little spot of color to suggest a landmass that has a lot of distance. All of a sudden there's all this information in a tiny bit of space. So I don't need to make big towering mountains now. If I want some mountains that look really big and distant, it's that tiny little portion of my painting. This is why I think it's so valuable to learn how to manipulate light and shadow in foreground objects to save yourself all the energy of painting background that you're just going to paint over. And for me, it's just been a helpful thing. I'm not trying to say how things should be done. It's just been a helpful tool in my paintings. Foreground first. That's usually the way I do it. But I am going to paint some trees over the top of that rock. To be fair, not all of the foreground is first. Okay, I'll mess with that sky later. I don't want to decide right this moment exactly what kind of sky I'll have. I'll leave that blue in my brush and start putting some brown. Now watch this, you'll see what I mean about the green. If I just take a tiny bit of that brown and I blend it into this, look, see, you don't want that color for your edge of the rocks, you know, the brown mixed with the blue sky. Ideally, you know, with painting, it'd be nice if you could just mix this color of light with this color of light and then you get your result. But paint doesn't mix like light, and that color won't look good if I use that on the edge of those rocks to make those, you know, well, it doesn't look as good. I shouldn't say it doesn't look good. It might look good. Not as natural as if I add violet to it. So, I got off on that tangent here. Let's put some rock faces up here. So here, I think it's safe to make some of these rock faces a brighter color than the sky, because when the sun shines sideways on a light colored object, you know, you can really get bright colors in comparison to a blue sky. A lot of the time the sky will be darker than the sunlit objects. Things, you know, lit up with direct sunlight. So I think that looks good for now. I'm not gonna add the yellow to this one because this I want to look real distant. Things get more bluish violet as they get distant. So I'll just leave the brown all by itself because the brown by itself is more violet than the brown with yellow added. So I've got the face of a more distant mountain there. That'll help this to look more distant than this too. Help separate them. And then for the shadow side, I definitely want to have some of that purple in there. Purple, violet, whatever you want to call it. So I'll just make some shapes and add this purple here, maybe put a few little nicks of that purple in places where it might have a shadow on this side of the mountain facing the sun. I want to go over this brown color that's there currently because that doesn't look distant enough. If I get rid of that, then this whole thing will look a lot more distant. I'm trying to decide if it looks a little bit too purple. I think it does. So, if it looks too purple, I can add a little bit of blue. Because the blue reacts with the brown, makes this greenish color. So I want something like this, but more violet than that. This has too much violet, so we'll go halfway between. We'll put some of the blue in there. It's looking a little bit too cartoony for my liking right at the moment. But you know, another painter might really like that. Look, it's fun to exaggerate things and see what kind of different feelings you can get from different color choices. All right, so now we've got a little bit blue or violet. To me, that looks a little more natural and distant. Put some more of that blue in there. There. Here was a little spot. Here was a little spot. Yeah, I like that better. Here I'm imagining another peak shooting up. Let me kind of get the paint out of my brush and add more of that light brown color. Right here. This is the, let's see, I've got kind of these hills, I've got those hills. I guess in the end, I don't really need the second layer of rocks up there. So maybe I'll get rid of those. Maybe I'll just go straight to my distant mountains instead. All right, let me grab my blue violet. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. You know, just this is enough, this little spot. Just like I was saying earlier, you know, you can get a lot of information out of a little shape if you have perspective in your picture. Since I'm seeing some perspective here, I feel like that little spot of rock is enough to make it feel like layers that are going back and back. Yeah, I like the way that looks. Deciding if I want to go a little bit darker. I think I might. Let's add a little bit more shadow in here. A little more blue, a little more violet. And I'm going to need brown because that is going to be way too vivid of a blue-violet. And we'll add a little bit of white. Now we'll start getting some variation within the shadow here. How about just a bit more brown on there? Oh yeah, I like that much better. That little bit of darker shadow pops out the shape of those mountains back there. I'll just grab this, make this a little bit lighter. You see, just like with the rocks up here, if I make this shadow lighter and then run it into this one, then it'll look like it's the shadow being cast by that peak, because I have the darker shadow than the lighter shadow here. I have the shadow of the mountain on the mountain. Yeah, I actually feel like I don't really need any more up there, so I'll probably get rid of a little bit of the mountain up in that top right corner. Here I feel like I just want a little bit more color, maybe some rocks sticking up in the sunlight. So I'm grabbing some of that brown, putting it in there with the white. Just little spots of color that could be a rock or a cliff way up far away. Put a couple in here too. That brown color becomes a distant sunlit orange, you know, because like I said, it's more violet than this yellower version with all the white and yellow added. So it ends up being a real good color for this. This color in the distance becomes the light brown, because that's the more grayish violet version of it. All right, I'm liking what I'm seeing right there. And so now I want to see some snow on those hills. Here, look at this, these shadows. So here's an important thing. These distant shadows are darker than these closer shadows. I need to flip-flop that. So I better put some darker shadows just real quick. I can just take some brown and add some darker shadows. I need a little bit of that violet in there because it is distant. I just need to bring the darkness level down a little bit so that I actually have a closer set of hills right here, or rocks, set of rocks. Can be a balancing act though, because it'll merge with this hill if I go too dark. So sometimes I end up in patterns of going back and forth, and I end up having to change a large part of my painting before I get it exactly where I want it. But anyway, the concept is that my shadows get darker as they come forward and my lights get lighter as they come forward. And I just want to see that gradually happening to all of my shapes. Oh, I just messed it up. I'll put a little bit more of that on there. See if I can bring it back. Just got to get some tiny shapes in there that'll help it to look like background. Truth is, even in photographs, a lot of the time it can be difficult to distinguish foreground from background if the picture wasn't taken with some strategy to, you know, this is the art of not just painting but also photography and making sure that your end result shows all that information, the depth, the difference between the close and the far. If you don't have some kind of atmosphere or change of shapes, then they can run together. And I run into the same problem with painting. All right, let's bring these down to that edge right there. See that rock coming out? Oh yeah, these were my closer rocks down here, so I still have room to kind of fine-tune those. But nevertheless, I still have that distance represented. I still think that it's working pretty good. Let's put a little more brown in here. And maybe a little bit of violet. Okay. I'm just messing with light and shadow. I don't know what I'm doing really. Just trying to get them to make some shapes. Make some shapes that I like. It's a tricky thing getting these to stagger this way, you know, like getting this. I have to look at my shadows and see darkest, lighter, you know, or more the atmospheric color. Make sure that those become more the color of the sky as they get further. I have to look at my light and see that it goes the opposite direction, a little darker as it goes toward. And then if I have both the light and the shadow doing that, then I can see that effect. So I'll hold off on putting too much detail in these for now. Too late, right? I already didn't hold off on putting that detail in there. But, you know, I'll move on to some other parts like I've been saying for the last half hour that I'm going to do. Let me take this, put it here. All right, let me step back for a minute. I'm gonna take a minute, take a short break, and clean my brush because it's getting all goobered up. But I want to show you that my brushes do get all messed up. I have a lot of consciousness about my technique so that I don't have paint this far down my brush after an hour of painting. But you can see on the base of the bristles, it is starting to work its way down into the ferrule, and that makes my brush flare out. When you wash your brush, I know this seems like very simple, obvious instruction, but soap really does make a difference if you wash it. Not the next day because it dries real hard in there, but if you wash with soap instead of just with water, really this powdery pigment that makes the paint, you know, not as shiny. Most paint has some kind of a flattening powder, and that gets lodged in there. The pigment and the powder gets lodged in the base of the bristles. The soap helps a lot. So when you do intermediate washing, you can save the shape of your brush for a lot longer just by using common hand soap. I'm gonna put pure white wherever I want snow in the sun. So I'm thinking places like this that look like a little pocket where the snow might be sitting in a corner somewhere. I'm not going to put a ton of snow in the sunlit areas. Wherever I have a darker area that looks like a shadow, I'll just put the snow to the right of that so that it looks like the snow is in valleys. So I know that this is kind of thinking on a micro scale, but to show you what I mean, see this little shadow right here. I don't want to put snow right over the top of that because this makes a three-dimensional shape that's coming out this way. So why not use that to make the snow look like it's resting in an area that's not, you know, that's not on a cliff that's popping out. So I can make the snow look more three-dimensional by being mindful of where I have those areas popping out already. And you know, it's not like I have to think so hard about it. I'm just looking for shape, looking for shadows, and then putting snow to the right of it. That's all. So I've got some there, I see some shadows here, and it might look cool to have some bright white snow up in here, maybe some in here, maybe here. We'll put a lot right here. This is getting higher, so as it gets to the top of this, I want to see a lot of white. Now I kind of lose a lot of my rocky look if I put lots of snow. So I guess I have to decide what I want. I'll just try a couple different things and then go from there. But I like the way snow looks when it's up high. I'm going to put snow right here on top of this guy. Coming right down that valley. Snow coming right down this valley. Okay, now on the left side of each patch of snow, I'm going to put a little bit of shadow. So the shadow needs to have the blue and the violet. This blue and violet don't have any of the brown mixed in. This blue and violet had a lot of the brown to make it gray. That's my rocks. But now I want a very vivid blue violet, the most pure I can get, because I'm adding hardly any of it to the white. So there's my blue and violet. It's in my brush. I'm grabbing a little bit of it, and then this color is going to be mostly white. Splashed on my painting there. Okay, so now just on the left side of each of these areas. It's funny, you wouldn't think this would make any difference at all. You know, you're like, what am I doing? You know, I'm just putting these tiny dots of hardly any change of color at all. But it makes a difference. After this dries, blue also gets pretty dramatically darker as it dries compared to other colors, so it's something to think about as well. So just on the left side, wherever I have a patch of white, and that's going to make it all look like it's resting in concaved areas. You know, as it moves this way, it's in a little more of a shadow. So likewise, since I'm establishing that the snow in my shadow has this blue-violet color to it, I'm going to do that color of snow all over the right side of my mountain. Just kind of thinning that out there a little bit. That looks like a shadow area. Okay, time to do the right side of the mountain. Let's put snow in these valleys. Now hopefully this color is still a little bit darker than my sky. I want it to be a little darker, and since it looks like it matches in lightness, it'll be darker. When paint dries, it's darker. This paint's dry, so this wet paint that looks like a match right now will, I think, darken down. I'll add a little bit more color just to be sure. Like I said before, it is a balancing act because I want it to be lighter than the, if I have to, I'll just make my sky lighter. I want it to be lighter than the shadow side of my mountain because it's snow. I would like it to be darker than the sky that it's in front of. Yeah, there we go. Now we've got snow way up there. This looks like a fun spot to put a little bit right on this, right on the top of that rock. Now I'm going to need some pure white. You know, just a tiny little patch of snow that's in that valley between those two rocks. Maybe a little here too. I'll use this blue violet to put it here because this is in a shadowed area. Then I'll grab a little bit of pure white again to highlight anywhere I think it might be in the sunlight. Maybe just a couple little patches still. Just a little bloop, bloop. I'm going to do what I said and adjust my sky color. Might just need another coat too, because that didn't cover. You can see colors underneath that popping through. So let's see if we can get the sky nice and light. Since the sky is not the focus of this picture, you can see it just takes up a small amount of space. I don't need to make a big, bursting, vivid blue sky. I can afford to wash the color out on this a little bit in order to get the needed contrast right here. I want to see that mountain. There, now it pops out a little bit better. I don't know what that big brown spot is. Oh, that's where I was demonstrating the green and the green effect from the blue. I was thinking, why did I paint that? All right, let's get that very light blue. You can put a lot of white with blue and still have it look like a blue. You know, the tiny bit of blue really affects the color. And it dries, like I said, it dries a lot darker. So if it looks almost colorless and white, then it's probably still good. Those mountains, I still feel like, man, I just really feel like they could still look better. More distant, you know, more huge and distant. I really want them to just look big and far away. I'm going to try putting one more distant mountain way up there. Just put some pure white on this side. So this will be almost the same color as the sky. Maybe we won't go that high up here. Let's cut that off a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. All right, then I'll grab my violet, and I don't need to add the brown to it this time because this is just snow up here. Let me add a little bit of water. This is starting to dry. I'll make that even bluer than the snow down here because it's further. Make it look a little closer to the color of the sky if I can. But I mean, the closeness is already just so close. I'm gonna do a little trick here. I'm going to make it lighter down here just for the sake of seeing the mountain that's in front of it. And then use a gradient because it's hard. If a gradient is subtle enough, it's hard to see that it even is a gradient. But it'll allow me to show both these edges. There we go. I like the look of that. Let's put a little bit more white in there, make it not such a perfectly straight peak. All right, nice. You know what I like about this picture right now is it no longer looks like Arizona. You know, it was feeling like Arizona to me. It was just my own backyard when I was just doing this down here. It's too much of a giveaway of what I'm always looking at. Now it feels different. It's got those high mountains. Now I feel like I'm imagining something fun. All right, shadow. I'm gonna put a shadow on this rock and then call it a day. I want a shadow on this rock because I want a tree in front of it. You can make a shadow for any color, and whether or not it looks like a shadow is not based on where you put it or if you have the right objects in place. It really is just the color, just like this looks like a shadow. So it's facing toward the sky. It's going to have the light of the sky. The sky is shining from all of those different directions way up there. The sun's only shining from that one spot, so that's why you have a hard shadow, because the sun shines from a very tiny location, one location. So you get a shadow cast where the sun is not hitting that rock. If I have a tree, I'm going to say there's a tree casting that shadow, but in that shadow is still all the light from the blue sky. That's why a shadow needs to have more blue. And so I'm going to mix this color with violet to get the result that would happen if it were blue light mixing with that. So I'll just do my brown and white to start with, because remember, my brown and white is already more violet than that. But then I'm going to add a little bit of violet as well to go a little bit more toward the violet blue. And we'll see what that looks like. Now I gotta be mindful of the darkness of these. I want it to still be lighter than those, and I think it is. Yeah, it's still pretty light. That's pretty good. Okay, so here, let's go a little bit. We have to kind of compress the values a little bit. We can't make as much contrast as I see outside because I just don't have that much brightness to work with. I gotta leave room for darker things is what I'm saying. All right. Now, I'm just painting a tree. We're going to make some little branches going up this way and this way. We're going to bend it down this way because it's going to kind of wrap around that corner. I'm thinking this is a pine tree. That's what I had in what I meant for it to look like in my drawing. Let's put the trunk going like this and then bending into that crack. Bend it into there, make it come out again and down, bending this way, then on that little crevice there. We get a little bit of water because working with this tiny amount of paint is making my brush skip a little bit. I don't like the look of that. Or I'll just get more paint. I'm going to gradually fill in more and more space. I like to do that gradually, you know, because it gives me the opportunity to see shapes that I like and preserve them if I want to. The tree is still casting a shadow around this bend, but that bend has less of that skylight on it. So here I'm going to start mixing more brown and continue the same tree shadow. So let me add brown to this. Just kind of thinking about the math here. This will be a fun effect for the shadow to wrap around this bend. I'll go back to the violet. Let's put the violet back in there. And now I'm going to bend it back into the light again, right here on these lighter spots. It's going to be fun putting a tree in front of that. It's always fun to be able to set a stage first and then put the object in there that it was made for. Put some little shapes of maybe trees or something right there. They could be coming from anywhere, you know. You don't have to keep track of what is making what shadow. As long as you've got a good shadow color, it's a shadow. Here we'll add a little bit more violet because that's further away. Need white too in there. Got to get just that right balance of color and lightness. Yeah, that's better. Now I'm making smaller strokes that are tighter together so that this has some perspective to it. It's fun working with these colors. I really like them. Put some brown in there. A little more brown down in here. Just trying to make some more definition in the rock. Just messing with shapes. Let's put some of that in here too. These shadows in here will need to get more brown as they start to move into this browner area. I feel like this cliff here needs a little something here. Let's see what happens if we kind of bring the top of it out like a tabletop a little bit. A little bit of that yellow, some white, the yellow brown white mix. That's my sunlit rock. So here's the color right there. Maybe it has a little bit of violet in it. We'll see if it's bright enough to get the effect. Get a little more yellow. And anywhere I put that color, it's the color of the light. It's going to look like light. It's the color that does it. Putting little tiny patches of that light coming through here I think will be a nice effect. Gradually less as it goes down because the vegetation is getting thicker as it goes down that canyon wall. Oh, I like the streaks that leaves. It looks like definition in the rock. Just putting a few more shapes on here before I decide to quit. Put a few little dots of light going into there too. Put a lot of light on that edge there. It's fun seeing it come together at the moment. I'm gonna put a little bit more light up on those middle layer cliffs, just with the brown and white, my distant highlight color. Sometimes I leave the color slightly unmixed and then I mix it on site here as needed, you know, because the having it unmixed can create little shapes, variations in the rock that look good. Let's put a little bit of shadow here. I like that too. It's fun that you can just put these colors wherever you want to try and it will create a three-dimensional shape and then you can just decide, do you like that shape or do you want to try another one? I can already see that I'm going to want to add more color to this, but I'm going to do that in the next video. You know, I want to make this rock, well, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I don't want to do that. You know, I want vibrant colors in the trees. I still have to add a lot of color to the trees. So I'm going to do like I did before. I'm going to rest, get a fresh look at it, and then decide.